I wasn't exactly an experienced outdoorsman when this happened, but I knew enough to get by. My uncle had always talked about this spot in the Huron National Forest near where I lived in Michigan, so I asked my girlfriend Amy if she'd like to go with me for the weekend. She said yes, so on the Saturday morning we packed up my car and headed out. Amy hadn't been camping in a really long time, so I was excited to show her what I'd learned and knew that she'd have a good time. We bought a few extra supplies from this place called The Last Post before driving to the small parking lot at the edge of the forest, where I took out the tent and gave Amy the other rucksack. It was fall, and as we walked through the forest, we both took in how beautiful it was. The air was fresh and I could hear water flowing. The place we were after was called Teller's Point, and it was only a small site, but the view of the lake was supposed to be incredible. After about 15 minutes and some help from Google Maps, we found it. You could see for about a mile over the water, and the small clearing was about 20 feet from the water's edge. Amy poured me a cup of coffee from our flask and I began putting up the tent. It was only a two-man double skin, but it was perfect for the occasion. After dinner, we looked out over the lake and talked about how we'd much rather be camping than at Amy's friend's party, which we'd been invited to. We'd put bug spray on as the flies and mosquitoes were everywhere, even though we had a small fire. Amy had brought one of those bug zappers shaped like a tennis racket, but even that did nothing to disperse them. At around 10:30, we decided to go to sleep, and I went off quickly. Amy woke me up with a start. My heart was pounding as I asked her what was wrong, but as I turned on the light on my phone, I saw Amy's face. She was terrified. Her eyes were wide and her bottom lip was quivering. She pointed to her right and covered the light. I listened and then heard something that sounded like soft footsteps. I whispered that it was probably an animal, but Amy said that it wasn't and told me to listen. Then I heard it. Somebody was singing outside, about 20 or 30 feet away. It was a woman. The sound was soft, but we heard it clearly. I grabbed the flashlight and Amy told me not to go outside, but something told me to warn this person off before they got too close to the tent. Once outside, it took a minute or so before I saw the figure. It was behind us on the dirt trail we'd used to find this place, and I shouted out that I was armed and to vacate the area, thinking that would deter it. I watched as it slowly danced, then disappeared into the dark. I got back into the tent and calmed Amy down. I nearly said that it looked like an old woman outside, but I didn't know if that would make it better or worse, so I just told her that I saw a person who was walking off. It took a while, but she calmed down and eventually fell asleep, as much as she tried to fight it. I told her that I'd stay awake, but the harder I tried, the worse it got, and I kept drifting off, only to wake up with a start, so I set my phone to alert me in 5-minute intervals. As the alarm went off at 3:15 in the morning and woke me once again, I checked on Amy, who was fast asleep, but I knew that something wasn't right. There was no noise from outside, no animals, and then I looked up. The old woman's face was 2 feet away from mine. She was peering in through the tent and shouted something that didn't even sound English. Amy jumped up and screamed as the woman hissed at her, then reached in further. Amy grabbed the bug zapper and pressed it on the woman's outstretched hand. Sparks flew as the old woman screamed and clutched her fingers, then disappeared. We zipped the tent all the way up and huddled together, Amy holding the zapper. We stayed like that till first light, where we got our stuff and went promptly to the car. I even left the tent behind. I called my uncle as soon as we got home and told him what happened. He laughed at me until he realized that I was serious. Then he must have felt guilty because he went to Teller's Point himself later in the day and dismantled the tent, then gave it back to me. I did some asking around about the old lady, but found nothing until the following March, where someone was complaining on Facebook about one of their family members being attacked in the Huron National Park. A 16-year-old boy had gone missing from his family's RV. He was found some hours later, although he was traumatized and his face was covered in scratches. He said an old woman had taken him. A crazy old woman. A week after my 21st birthday, I took my younger brother Ben to the Washakie National Park in our parents' RV. They were going through a divorce, and it was particularly hard on Ben, but if I'd known what was going to happen, I'd never have suggested it. It was mid-July and we were both excited. I'd driven the RV a few times and was confident on the roads. We loaded it up with everything we needed and headed out, listening to Metallica and Slayer as we drove the 2-hour journey to the forest. Ben didn't mention our folks once on that drive, and he looked the happiest that I'd seen him in a long time. He was navigating the journey, and we soon saw a sign for the park. We came here a lot as kids, and used to camp out in the RV at Piney Ridge. So after 1 or 2 wrong turns and a bathroom break each, we parked up and I texted my parents to say we were both safe. Even though they were getting a divorce, they still cared and were often overprotective of Ben. Personally, I thought it was healthy for him to have some breathing space, and I made us both a cup of coffee before firing up the barbecue. While I was cooking the burgers, Ben shouted my name and I ran over to him. He looked panicked and pointed to the trees. Then I saw what he was seeing. There was a person wearing a brown robe and a skull mask. This person didn't move, they just stood still in a very eerie manner. Finally, I shouted out what was their problem and they turned around and walked back to the trees. The burgers were beginning to burn, so I told Ben to stay close as I attended to them. Then we ate on a bench beside the RV. To be completely honest, I thought the hooded person was just someone messing around. This was a heavily used area, and in my mind, some 15-year-old kid had gotten hold of a scary outfit. I didn't think too much about it after that, even as it turned to night and we went back into the RV. It was around 1 in the morning when it happened. It started with an odd kind of chanting coming from outside, which sounded Latin. I peeked through the curtains in the bedroom section of the motorhome and saw people in the same robes and masks as the person earlier, but there were lots of them, and this time I was scared. I woke Ben up and told him what was going on as I heard the handle on the outside door rattle. I said that we were safe for the time being inside the RV, and I wondered how it would be to reverse it in the dark, as there were trees in front of us. There was a sudden bang from the window beside me and I heard agitated, muffled voices on the other side of the glass. Ben kept saying that they were going to get in, but I assured him that I'd locked the outside doors. Of course, if they wanted to, they could easily shatter a window or just torch the motorhome, but I didn't tell him that. My instinct was to just hide, but they knew that we were in here already. There was a bang on the roof, then I heard footsteps up there. This was really not good, as there was a small skylight that somebody could get through if they wanted. I told Ben to stay where he was, and I opened the bedroom door. I could see movement outside of all the windows, and there was even more banging on the walls. I knew I'd have to drive away. They wouldn't expect me to, and I tried to picture exactly where everything was before I started the ignition. I always kept the keys in the glove box, just in case. I could see the robed people outside. I didn't know if they could see me. I hoped that I had the element of surprise on my side. Ben was safe in bed. If I waited any longer, then they could slash the tires or immobilize us in a different way. It was now or never. I put the keys in the ignition and switched the high beams on. I shouted to Ben to hold on as Metallica blared out, and I reversed the RV as quick as I could, not caring if I bumped into any of the figures. I reversed further and faster than I should have, overshot the exit, then scraped a tree. But once I got my bearings, I put my foot down and saw them run out of the way like scared rabbits, and I raced towards the dirt track which led to the main road. Ben hurried out of the bedroom and sat in the passenger seat, then looked relieved as he saw that we were out of danger. He patted me on the shoulder and turned the music up. There was no traffic on the road, so we arrived home at around 3:30 a.m. Ben had called my parents on the way back to tell them what had happened, and we had a routine interview with the police the next day, but as far as I knew, they never found any trace of the hooded people. About a week later, I ordered a book about the Washakie National Park and read it cover to cover. There was a particularly interesting chapter regarding a centuries-old cult named the Order of the Blood Crows, whose members wore brown robes and skull masks. It was theorized that the last remaining members were long dead, but others weren't quite so sure.